strike? Who can't be on strike but wishes they were because they're in for the fight? Okay, great. Can we make some noise for the picketers? And it may be even bigger, make some noise for the heart and soul of this industrial action, the students. Now make a particular kind of noise for the Vice-Chancellors. Yeah. Boo. Okay, why boo? I'll tell you why. We've had enough of racist, misogynist and ableist pay gaps. We've had enough of the structural injustice that presents the context of those pay gaps, including a hostile environment on our university campuses. There are some other things. We've had enough of escalating casualisation and precarity. We've had enough of our pensions being decimated. There's some more. We've had enough, this is it, of workloads that are totally impossible, that leave workers exhausted, that leave students under-supported as they're paying record high fees. And especially, we've had enough of a situation where Vice-Chancellors get paid over 300 grand, while people who are employed to clean their offices, who are outsourced workers, are paid close to minimum wage. And so basically we've had enough of this nonsense. Yeah, down with this sort of thing. But this week, last week, we've been on strike. At 60 universities across the country, picketing in the rain, teach outs on loads of amazing political, quite radical and also deeply, deeply compassionate subjects led by workers and by students. We've had student demos, student blockades, really powerful gestures of solidarity, and I think the employers should know they have a fight on their hands. So, welcome to the Brighton, Sussex, UCU joint rally. I'm Arabella, by the way. I'm a trade unionist and I'm a woman on strike. Yeah, women. So, we're going to hear from some really brilliant speakers. We've got staff and students at both Brighton and Sussex. We've got UCU members, and we're also hearing from political party candidates of a certain kind who are in solidarity with the strike. And we're going to have some music from Sussex picket line rabble-rousers, Phil, and the IDS band Abby. No, it's not. Tabby and Al. If you join their names, they're called Abby. Before we start, just to say that there are some seats here at the front if anybody needs to sit. Is there anybody here who would like, put your hand up if you'd like to come forward and have a seat? Make your way forward. Make way for that person. And anybody else, if you want to come forward and take a seat, just tap the person in front of you and they will let you through. Where's Nehaal? Are you ready for some speeches? Yeah! we go. I'm gonna. Oh, we have a. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We've got another one.
Hello.
Oh, okay. You have to speak right into it. Very alarming.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to introduce Nehaal Bajwa, who is a UCU member. Nehaal Bajwa.
Yeah, that's fine. It's good.
Who's a UCU member at Sussex. And Nehaal is. Can you hear me? Nehaal is a student and a worker at Sussex. She's a PhD student and she's a doctoral tutor, so she gets to see the type of exploitation that brings us to the picket line in a very particular way, and she is kindly volunteered to be the first speaker, so can we give her some love?
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a bit about my own, perspective of a PhD student, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the Student Solidarity Campaign at Sussex, and they're around, they're over here. Okay, so, as PhD students, so I was a funded PhD student, but I'm now, the last year, and I often have trouble working for health reasons, and I look at the lives of the early career researchers around me, and even those on permanent contract, and I know I will not be able to, I think, maybe one day, but maybe never, sustain the 60 or 70 or 80-hour work weeks that's currently required to meet the teaching and research demands of life as a full-time faculty member, or even develop your CV to indicate suitability for such a role. And moreover, it's deeply unpleasant that PhD students and early career researchers are pitted against each other for this kind of vanishingly small number of jobs. I refuse to accept that we are in competition against each other rather than against exclusionary and bizarre cost-saving management techniques. So it's really difficult finding the motivation to even finish, but it's an access issue. Stop building these great buildings that may or may not be accessible. There are loads of different kinds of access issues here. I mean, I think I'll go into this later. Anyway, so often you're left kind of, even if you are still committed to being in academia, you're left kind of scraping together enough income to support yourselves in a city with the most expensive housing relative to income in the country, which is kind of nuts. And for most people, the situation doesn't improve when you've vivaed. There are people kind of, exemplary postdocs doing loads of extra free work for the university on loads of different funded projects, and they won't get jobs. They don't get jobs for years. And I mean, that forces you back on family support, or where that's lacking, it forces you back on state support, and the benefit system is a joke now after 10 years of austerity, and kind of deliberately shoves people back into work, which is usually not work, which is usually just, deeply insecure. And then, so these people are often pushed out of academia entirely. And I'm very well aware that things aren't much better for senior lecturers and professors. I know people who book their time 3 weeks in advance. What if something happens? What if you need to go to the doctor? What if you need all these things? And it's just, there's no leeway, and it doesn't have to be this way. So it's kind of, sorry. I'm going to let other people talk about the pay gaps, which I don't experience in quite the same way as someone on kind of longer term or permanent contracts, because I'm not on one. I probably would see one for several years. And obviously casualisation is one way in which those work, but I'm still a student, so I can't speak to those as much as I think other people can. So I just wanted to talk a bit about the Student Solidarity Campaign. So at Sussex, we've got this kind of, I think the WhatsApp group is like 150 people now. And I've recently been I've just joined really, and they kind of developed at the last strikes, and there is this awareness among those students of the ways in which students benefit from being considered responsible for their own education in conversation with tutors and lecturers, rather than consumers passively absorbing kind of knowledge or ways of thinking, as if that's how it works anyway. And our group ran a manifesto writing session as a teach out, in which mostly students and a couple of staff members collectively explored what we think we want from an education. And what emerged was a strong focus on breaking down some of the walls in higher education between student and teacher, permanent and temporary staff, funded and unfunded, well and unwell, and improving conditions for everyone. So I think it was you, said, instead of all these assessments to prove if you're going to be eligible for support, how about we make a more accessible university for everyone?
Yeah!
So I actually workshopped this part of the speech with a student group, and they suggested that I mention that this mistreatment of staff and the impact it has upon students' education is an inevitability of marketization of universities, which is in itself an inevitability of capitalism. But that doesn't mean there aren't ways out. And then they said I should focus on how meeting targets and making profits necessarily constrains our ability to properly resource the learning environment in ways that work for workers, who are the costs getting cut, and students who have more varied needs than any targets or outcomes can properly reflect. And then also, you're paying all this stuff, but actually you're not resourcing your own education. You're paying all these fees, and that's going towards something which isn't, in fact, your education. Yeah, managers, VCs. Okay. And then another thing was just that there's this narrative from VCs and those who are unsupportive of the strikes that they're hurting student education, and they're disrupting students. But loads of students at Sussex are coming to the Teach Out, supporting staff on the pickets. They're running their own events. They're running kind of hot food and drinks around campus, waking up at 6 a.m. to blockade management buildings. Very naughty. They're having an excellent time, and they're learning a lot of the things that we're all going to need across society to push back against what is over 30 years of neoliberalism now. And as Connor likes to say, I don't know if Connor's here, about the strikes.
I learned more in the strikes than the whole rest of my university education.
That's kind of his line. Okay. Yeah, Connor's line, which gets more and more intense as a couple of weeks ago it was, I learned more in those strikes than something, and now it's like, I've learned more in those strikes than I learned across the rest of my university education. You're like, wow, that's an indictment. But yeah, I know that the students at Brighton haven't had as much luck. I know that the student union, despite the NUS line being to support the strikes, have not supported the strikes, whereas at Sussex they have, and we've had quite a lot. I mean, they should be supporting, but so I know that they've had a lot more trouble getting student involvement and support, but maybe we should build those links a bit more. And keep this going after the strikes are over, building more solidarity across staff and students and across universities. Yeah, thanks.